Welcome back to McNulty's Book Corral. Have you ever read a Stephen King novel at midnight? Have you ever picked up a Stephen King book, maybe after coming home from work, it's late in the afternoon, you have dinner, you start reading a Stephen King book, and all of a sudden it's midnight, and you're thinking, oh my God, you're looking at your watch, you're thinking, I have to get up at 5, whatever, and yet you don't want to put it down, you want to get through another chapter, one more chapter, Have you ever done that? Well, I certainly have. In fact, it was about a year ago that I did an episode on Stephen King's fairy tale, which I praised, and you can go back and watch that episode, or better yet, find the book and read it. It's one of his masterpieces. And I recently read Holly, and I wanted to talk about Holly. And I want to talk about Stephen King's amazing career in general terms, and some of the things that endear him to me. So I thought I would talk about Holly. So fair warning, there may be spoilers here. So if you don't want to hear too much, just stop watching the video. We're going to talk a little bit about Holly. I'm not doing a review. I have to stress that a lot. People think I'm reviewing here. I'm not reviewing anything. I'm just telling you what I read recently, and I kind of liked it. I don't consider that reviewing. I'm not getting into in-depth critiquing. But Holly is a really good book, and I wanted to talk about it in the context of some other things. So I picked two other Stephen King books to bracket it. Going way back to 1986, this is my original copy of It, which is one of his masterpiece horror novels. I'm sure you're all familiar with It. There have been, 2 movies made on this, or television series? I don't know for sure. I've never seen them. And by the way, I refuse to watch them. And it's because I'm so fond of the book, I really don't want to watch a movie, based upon the novel. Now, I heard one of them is good and one of them is just so-so. I don't know. I hear different things about those productions, but I'm more interested in the book. When it came out, it was such a big book, and everybody was after it, and I'm really lucky that I was able to keep my copy. What's interesting here for me is when I looked at it recently, I hadn't realized this is the first edition, 6th printing from 1986. This book sold so fast that they began reprinting it almost immediately. And I don't remember how long before the book came out before I bought it, but I wasn't fast enough because this is clearly listed as the 6th printing, 1986, and that's amazing. What a great book. Okay, so we're talking about, this is the type of book that made Stephen King's career. He was a genre writer. He was a writer of horror fiction, and it perfectly exemplifies that idea of horror fiction. So I wanted to bracket it with that. His bread and butter. He's always had a weird imagination. And then recently I also read Elevation, which is a novella. And they published it in book form, this little book form. You rarely see that any longer either. And so I wanted to bracket this commentary on Holly with the old, and then again something more recent, the new, to demonstrate the great diversity that Stephen King has as a writer. He really is no longer a genre writer. He's become almost mainstream literature, which the highbrow critics in the East Coast, they will dispute that, and they don't like him, and they never did. But he really is perhaps the greatest popular writer in the world right now, English-speaking world, let's say. I don't think that's such a bold statement to make. Elevation, I read recently, and he has a little bit in the beginning thinking of Richard Matheson. So this book takes a lot from Richard Matheson's The Shrinking Man, the original, and even the character is Scott Carey. In this imaginative book, short book, Scott Carey is losing his weight. He's becoming lighter, but he's not losing his physical mass. It's just he's becoming lighter for unexplained reasons, just as in Richard Matheson's book, he was shrinking. So You can think of that as supernatural or science fiction. However, it doesn't matter. What really matters here is that this idea of him going into infinity, either with Matheson or with King, this is an analogy for death. That's the way I looked at it. But before then, we have this really incredible little story about Scott Carey making friends with a lesbian couple in town who are being ignored and made fun of in town. So once again, Stephen King puts in these relevant, timely issues into his narrative. And he does it superbly. It's just really engaging. You really feel for everybody in this book. Just brilliantly done short novella. And I'm glad they put this out in this format. I don't know if this is getting a lot of attention or not. It's inexpensive on Amazon, so if you haven't read this, pick this up. And if you've read Holly recently, pick that up too. So with Holly, what we have with Holly is we have Stephen King writing a mainstream thriller. Again, he's writing genre, but he's not writing horror, although there are dark elements to this. The older couple, again, spoilers here, the older couple are cannibals. And in a mainstream town. So Holly Gibney is the main character. You've encountered her before in some other books. So a thriller in the same vein as Mr. Mercedes and a few others. So Stephen King is proving yet again that he can write pretty much in any. The beer is around the corner at the bar. He can write in any genre. He can write and tackle any type of contemporary thinking, current events. He can put those societal elements in there and make it timely, make it believable, make it engaging, and you're turning the pages. Holly is an excellent thriller. I read it and I started it about 5-6 in the afternoon, and I finished it after midnight. I actually finished it the following morning because I did fall asleep, but I almost read it straight through. It's pretty good. It's not one of his longer books, so it's if you just keep at it, you can do it. Again, I consider myself a skilled reader, so really a fantastic thriller. So Stephen King now can write. He can write horror. He can write thrillers. He can write science fiction, which he's done that numerous times. He can write fantasy, which he did going way back to Eyes of the Dragon. Of course, a year ago we talked about Fairy Tale, which is a masterpiece. I just love that book. I really love that book. And this is another great one from Stephen King. So, we've reached this point in his life and our lives, for those of you that go back to Carrie. Remember Carrie? Remember Christine, the car? And remember Cujo? I know people talk about The Shining. They talk about Salem's Lot. And I love those books too, but it was Cujo. It was Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary. Have you read Pet Sematary? Those are classic horror novels from Stephen King. Since then, he's gone into science fiction, apocalyptic future tales. You know what they are. So I don't have to tell you what they are. And so many other things. On and on. He goes on and on. And as time has gone on, I really have come to appreciate him more at this point in my life as he ages as well. He's older than me, not by much. And now I've been looking forward to everything he puts out. It's like, I got to read that, And so lately I've been thinking I should go back and reread the Dark Tower series. That's incredible. There we have Western genre elements, along with fantasy, etc. So many things that Stephen King can do that I think that he has, as a writer, for me, Stephen King transcends genre. He now can just write anything he wants. He is writing anything he wants, and he's making it work. Incredible literary career. Years ago, I read a comparison. I don't remember the author. I don't remember what magazine it was. I think it was a mainstream magazine. It may have been Time or Newsweek, or I don't know what it was. But they compared him to Charles Dickens way back then. And I think that comparison is appropriate. He really is doing exactly the same thing that Charles Dickens did. And for me, Charles Dickens is the father of the modern novel. You know, if you take a look at the entirety of his work, take a look at even his difficult books like Bleak House. Bleak House is an entirely modern novel. You know, you would read it, you'd think it was written by somebody today. And there's so much of that is in Charles Dickens that we get. Even A Tale of Two Cities, which is rather fanciful. I love that novel. That was the first Charles Dickens book that I read. Anyways, comparing Stephen King to Charles Dickens, I don't know how he would react to that. I've never met Stephen King. I would love to shake his hand, but you know, he can't go anywhere without a crowd. And authors these days, they don't extend themselves to fans. And perhaps for good reason, because we live in a very strange world, kind of a frightening world. And Stephen King certainly is. He certainly is aware of that, is he not? I mean, come on. So Holly, Holly Gibney is back, and she gets her own novel. She's running the detective agency. She gets hired to track down a young girl, and that leads her on the trail of darkness. What's interesting about what Stephen King chose to do with the narrative for me was that the readers know up front what the older couple is doing and what they're about. Holly does not. So you have back and forth between what they're doing and Holly's trek to uncover their activities, which of course becomes quite suspenseful and horrifying at the end, but quite satisfying too. Really a fine thriller. You know, I've talked in other episodes, I've said I don't like modern thriller writers. Stephen King and Preston and Child are the exception for me. You know, that's Stephen King can write anything. I'm going to read it. And so could Preston and Child. The other guys, whatever. Stephen King is in a class by himself, however. So if you haven't read Holly, pick it up and get it. And if you haven't read Elevation, this short little novella, you can find this on Amazon. And my edition with the original fantastic cover artwork of It. If you haven't read It, you know, perhaps Stephen King to me doesn't need any introduction, but I know there's a new generation out there. They haven't really got into him yet. Go back and find this. I'm sure there's modern editions you can find. I just love this cover on this. I'm a cover guy, you know. You can't judge a book by its cover. Right there. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little chit-chat about the fantastic and wonderful Stephen King. Stay well, stay happy, feed your brain, and if you're reading Stephen King at midnight, just remember, it's perfectly okay. Well, make sure the door is locked.